So today we're going to get back on track with writing our methods. And so the same way you think about methods with regards to a normal research study as far as outlining what you're going to do, that's the same thing here. Now we're going to write this in the past tense because there's no use writing it in the future tense and then changing it when we actually do our final paper. So this is going to outline what we are going to do. So as always, the main document that we would like to use for our writing is this Prisma checklist. And we are going to write now 5 through 16. Now, this is also for meta-analyses, and we are not doing a meta-analysis. If you remember what a meta-analysis is, it's when you then would repool the data and run new statistics. We're just not going to do that. Most of the time, you have to have a very specific outcome of interest in order to do that because you all have to be analyzing the same thing. And so that's not as common anyway. And I don't want to get into statistics. So some of those go through. So here is the methods that we are going to be doing. I also created this document that I will either share with you on Canvas or let you just modify as you go with your writing now. But as with the case of any sort of research, methods are usually very standardized based off of the type of research that you are doing. You then would insert in your own information. So if you combine that with the Prisma document as far as standard reporting, we have very similar methods throughout all of us. So I figured opposed to just using examples, I would kind of create a little like fill in the blank type worksheet. So here we go. Pause. That's not going to work. Okay. So bouncing back and forth between the Prisma checklist and the Word document, if that's not showing up online, you can just kind of have both up there. The first one that we're doing is protocol and registration for 5. So this is if you have a very specific protocol. Now, in some cases, right, there are established protocols for doing some of these systematic reviews. If you look at like Cochrane review, what Cochrane review is it's a database that does systematic reviews, and they have very specific protocols on how they do their systematic reviews. And so you could describe some of your methods by just referencing a previously published thing. Well, we have something similar like that. It's this Prisma statement. So in order to get number 5 in there, we're just going to state it outright. This study was conducted according to the preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis Prisma Group 2009 statement, and we cite that. So that gives additional information about our research that they could go look at from there. So eligibility, these don't have to necessarily go in order. So I like to kind of take the eligibility criteria out. Right, and so now I'm going to continue with the search strategy. So for our search strategy, the next part is going to be, describing what we're doing. So I like to just start with the research question utilized was, and we would insert our PICO question there. Now I added this optional statement area. This is where your preliminary data and preliminary searching comes into place. If you do not believe that you're going to be able to find exactly what you're looking for in your research, and so you're going to have to make some modifications to your searching, you would add a statement like this. Preliminary analysis of the current literature noted an absence of research concerning whatever you think's missing. All right, and then you add something as such. The inclusion criteria were broadened in order to include additional research. A discussion of the relevance of additional research was also conducted. All right, just a basic statement saying we weren't going to be able to find exactly what we were looking for, so we broadened our search out a little bit, and we will discuss the differences. But you don't necessarily need that. Okay. Further going into our search thing, a comprehensive search of the literature was conducted on PubMed, Medline, Sports Discus, and Cumulative Index to Nursing and Allied Health literature, seen all complete databases. We just say the databases we did, yeah. If you searched it, we would still say that you searched it because it adds credibility to the fact that you looked for it there. On the board. I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to give it to you specifically, or I'm just going to let you just look at it. You don't have to take a picture of it, it's recording the video. This whole, everything that's up there and me talking? Oh. Thought you were taking a picture of the screen. Yeah. Been there, done that. I'm sure I will end up giving it to you. It's just me being silly if I want to read the exact same wording over and over again. But I'm going to read the exact same wording over and over again. I mean, you can manipulate these to have your own sort of flair or whatever. I just wrote this morning, actually this weekend, fixed it up this morning. All right, so you can fix any language. I mean, and I don't do grammar and stuff well, so there's probably grammatical errors in there. So still describing the search strategy with that. In addition, cross-referencing of articles was done to ensure the thoroughness of the search process. This is what we did with our annotated bibliography portion of our synthesis of research. Right, for every article that we read and we include, we look at their references to see if there are any references that should also be included. Right, and eventually as you go through, you would not have any of those because you will have included all the relevant articles. That's the point of the systematic review. All right. Then the search strategy utilized included the following search terms, and you would just insert your entire search strategy with the parentheses and the ands and the ors and all that sort of stuff with quotation marks for the exact terms. Basically, the same search strategy that you put on that worksheet would go right here. And then the final search was conducted on, and then you would insert the search date. So at that point, we would have covered search number, information sources, number 7, the search number 8. Inclusion and exclusion criteria. This is how we determine what articles get included within our systematic review. I like to just start with whatever my first most important part of my PICO question is, because that's the area of research. So I go, it'd be like speed training research that were published in English in a scientific peer-reviewed journal were included. Basically, now we've just included 2 inclusion criteria. It's got to be published in English. It's got to be in a peer-reviewed journal. So anything not in English, not in a peer-reviewed journal, would not be eligible for included. Studies were required to include, and then basically you include at least 2 parts of your PICO question. Probably 1 and 2, maybe 3, could be all the way to 4. Whatever the studies have to talk about. Right, so if you're doing doing yours and you're looking at high school athletes, and that's part of the importance, it has to include high school athletes, obviously, you're going to say that it has to include high school athletes. In your mind, be thinking about what research do I want to read and what research do I not want to read. The rest of this sort of stuff with that is just somewhat of preference. In addition, only randomized controlled trials were eligible for inclusion. That's pretty standard. Any research that was not a randomized controlled trial or in which data was not able to be extracted, meaning like it didn't present the data, regarding the inclusion criteria was excluded with reasons noted. You have to add this with reasons noted because that will be part of what we do. So that has now gotten our eligibility criteria 6 in there. Study selection and data extraction gives us most of the rest. So this is what you're going to do. So we're just going to describe it. Studies were initially screened by the lead author by title, with studies that were obviously not relevant and duplicates removed. Should be duplicates, right? And duplicates removed, right? So first thing you do when you do your search, right? You go through, you look at all the titles and you remove the ones that aren't relevant. Following initial screen, the lead author conducted a review of article abstracts for inclusion or exclusion criteria. Next, we're going to look at the abstracts. It was not possible to ascertain the inclusion or exclusion of an article based on the abstract alone. Full text analysis was conducted. Then we looked at the full text. All articles were then scored by the lead author on the Pedro scale for inclusion in the analysis. We're going to Pedro scale them. Data was further extracted by the lead author to include subject characteristics, a description of the study intervention and comparison group, as well as the measures used in the study. Finally, data was recorded regarding whatever we're most interested in. So these are the things we're pulling out of each research study as far as describing that. And then we're finally going to record data on that. And so that gives us then study selection, data collection process, data items, as well as our summary measures. So next we have different discussions on bias. So bias analysis, each article was screened by the lead author for potential biases, including the presence of external funding that might be considered a conflict of interest. In addition, sequence generation, allocation, concealment, blinding, incomplete outcome assessment, selective reporting biases, and any other potential sources of bias were identified. Potential biases were included in the final analysis of data. In addition, it should be noted that, okay, so that's basically, we searched them for any bias, and if there was anything that comes up in the bias analysis, we will include that in our discussion. Pretty simple. So that covers the risk of bias of individual studies. We already did the summary of measures. The synthesis of results, that's for meta-analysis, so we don't have to do that for 14. 15, risk of bias across studies. In addition, it should be noted that there may be a risk of bias across the entirety of the published literature that is included in any systematic review, as there is usually a publication bias with negative or insignificant results not being published. The resulting bias was minimized by giving more weight in favor of the negative results when being compared to the positive results during the results discussion. That's saying that we know that it's harder to get research published that finds negative or insignificant results. So when we did our analysis of the literature, we weighed more heavily negative results. So what's that mean when we start writing? If there are 5 articles of similar quality that say it works and 5 articles of similar quality that says it doesn't work, we are going to niche that up, right? And say that although it's still inconclusive, it trends towards not working. Right? Because for every article that, for every insignificant article or article that finds something doesn't work, you could probably assume that there's at least another half of one, or for every 2 that find, yeah, for every, whatever, 1.5 times, right? Every 3 articles, right, there's probably a 4th one that didn't get published. Okay. And that's pretty much our methods section. If you look through there, risk of bias across study, additional analysis, describe the methods of additional analysis. That's for a meta-analysis. We're not doing that. So that's our method section. Like I mentioned last time when we played with the class schedule a little bit, that's part of the reason why in there. We need to think about this, but we're all going to be doing pretty much the exact same thing, unless there's a legitimate reason why we deviated. And we can talk about that. Questions on writing the methods? 14 and 16. Yep. Correct. Now, each of those are in this document, so you're more than welcome to just use this document to kind of flow through it, but because I'm just teaching you from the Prisma guidelines, so like that's just another resource, but I'm only talking about what's in the Prisma guideline as well. Other questions about writing the methods? So, question is about whether or not you should have your search results done before starting writing your methods. The short answer is no. The long answer is you need to be fairly comfortable with your search terms. Now, it doesn't really matter too much because you can go and change your search terms in this document, in this method section pretty easily. Only the bolded areas are like specific even across all of these studies. So most of this will be very similar, even if you had to make some changes later. Any other questions on the methods? Friday? I believe it's due Friday. I don't know. I would assume it's due Friday with, yeah, Friday with peer reviews and all that over the weekend like we normally do. Yeah, I will assign peer reviews for the introduction here after class. Theoretically. Peer reviews for the introduction are theoretically due Wednesday. We're a little bit off schedule with that. On these peer reviews now, right? Help your classmates out the same way you would want to be helped out, because these things are now in fact drafts and will be regraded. So I will give you guys feedback as well, but your grades on these assignments will basically be on appropriateness. You know, did you give it, you know, the good old college try sort of thing, opposed to the actual quality of it, right? Because it is just a draft. So you should be getting feedback from your classmates. You'll be getting feedback from me, and you should be making changes as you go forward with this and constantly improving. Yes, at the end, you resubmit all of these together in a single paper. So you can either write, I mean, my suggestion, just because it's easier, is I would just continue in one document. So my introductions at the beginning, I would continue, and each time that I submit it, I would save it with, you know, the date. And so that way I'd have a whole bunch of versions of this document along the way. Yeah, because the reference, like the reference list and everything's going to be the same with that. It also, you know, helps from the standpoint that like this is not going to ever be reference number one. If you had 7 references in the introduction, this is now 8. If you had 12, this is now 13. So opposed to having to fix it and change it, just one document, add the date to it each time you save it or you submit it, or when, however often you want to submit or save. Also at that note, backing up, making sure, you know, like it's in your Google Drive or somewhere, opposed to just on your computer is smart things. Anytime you're doing anything that, you know, ends up being a long project, having that would be better. Okay, the last thing that I want to show you, because we're next going to start on the results, is this Prisma flow chart. So this is now, you will create this for your results, but this now describes graphically what will be the results of your search process. So it's sometimes easier to see it. And if you want to, you can go ahead and get started creating this. You know what you're going to do because you just wrote the methods. The results starts with the fact that you have completed doing everything. So you can start creating your results now. And in fact, that's probably a good thing to start doing. You have your databases and your search strategy from your methods. They're going to be in there. Type them in. How many did you have? And so this number is going to be the total of all the different searches. So if PubMed had 10, Sports Discus had 10, Medline had 10, CNOL had 10, this would be 40. Okay. This additional records identified through other sources, that's going to be your cross-referencing aspect. So you will just end up adding those in later. So if you have 40 articles, it's possible that maybe 20 of them are in more than one thing, right? So that's where now, after duplicates removed, you would be 20. You have records that are screened. This is the title screening and the abstract screening. So this number plus this number equals this number. All right, full text. Once you get to full text, at that point, you're probably ready to stop. But you should start in the near future doing your search. So that way, any article that you need full text, you can start getting the full text sent to you if you need it for interlibrary loan. So writing the method shouldn't take that long. The next thing I would recommend is do this chart. Make sure you write down these things as you do it. All right, this is available as a Word document as well. So you can kind of type into it, and then you will just make it a picture that you will insert, and this will more than likely be figure 1 in your systematic review. So write down how many you had from each, how many after duplicates were removed, how many you had to screen, how many you were excluded. And then if you can't exclude it, if you have any belief that it might be appropriate for your systematic review, it goes to the next step. If you want to know what's appropriate for your systematic review, go back to your inclusion and exclusion criteria. So questions on like implementing your methods. Very good. Any other questions or comments for the good of the cause? Yep, stuff like that. So like if you go back and look at one of those PICO documents, it had a section for exclusion criteria with that. So like if there are things that you want to exclude, say you only want high school athletes, then you could specifically mention excluding things that didn't have high school athletes. Or if you go back and look at this, this would be here where it has to include, if number 3 was high school athletes, states were required to include A with B and high school athletes. So if it didn't have high school athletes, it would not be included. Now, remember when you're searching these, it is possible that like half of a research study can be included. So it still gets included, but only half is of interest to you. So say it was looking at high school athletes and college athletes. Well, it still includes high school athletes. So we would only look at that data, not the college athletes data. It's also possible that you could have a publication date range requirement. This is really only applicable if you have a newer form of treatment that only got started like at a specific point in time. So like for Justin with this CBD thing, right? We're really probably more interested in like CBD oils opposed to smoking marijuana, right? So CBD oils for medicinal sort of thing only really started however many years ago. So anything before that we could eliminate as not the same. You know, there, even if you were using, you know, CBD oils from the plants before it was like truly mass produced, and you know that it's irrelevant because it's so different from what is being done today. But you can also get away with that by just more strictly applying your inclusion criteria. The only reason you would do the date range is because it helps weed out some of the things faster. So that is the assignments for today. And going forward, on Wednesday, we will start to talk more about the results, and we will spend quite a bit of time in the results section because that's when now, like I said, the results you write as in you have already completed it. Well, it takes some time to, in fact, complete the results. So get started so you can start getting full text articles on the way, because after Wednesday, we will start doing basically an annotated bibliography type assignment for all the articles that are included in our study. All right. Any last minute questions or things I can do with you that would benefit the large group? Yes, I will share that document.